Well, good morning, everybody. My name is David Jefferson. I currently work for Skagit County Public Health, but I maintain a private business doing motivational interviewing trainings. My background is I used to work for Oregon Health and Sciences University. They received a grant from the federal government, and they funded 9 technical assistant agencies across the United States, and they were known as the ATTCs, which are Addiction Technology Transfer Centers. And I spent 6 years working with them, training the behavioral health workforce in Oregon, Idaho, Alaska, Washington, and the Pacific Islands. And so I did a variety of trainings in all those states. And now one of the primary things I do is provide motivational interviewing training in the Northwest region for a select group of folks. And so what I'm doing this morning is giving folks a high-level overview, like I said here, a passing view of motivational interviewing, so people get a sense about what is this journey that we're about to embark on, and what more can admin and the leadership of Opportunity Council do to support the work of motivational interviewing. And so I'm hoping that this will be kind of informative, but it'll probably leave you with some questions too. So I'll invite you to ask me questions as we go along, and I'll just run through the slideshow and we'll do that. So to get us started, I wanted to ask you, you have a variety of staff that are in many different positions in your organization, and they probably talk with you about some of the motivational challenges that you have with your clients. So I'd just like to ask you, what have been some of the motivational challenges you've heard from the people you work with that serve your clientele? What are some of the challenges?
I think in my group, we have ambivalence about employment.
Okay.
Employment group, and whether they're ready and willing to accept, employment. I think also around sort of adopting techniques and skills that we try to teach them through our financial literacy programming.
Right. Okay.
In a totally different area of my work, we are trying to change behaviors around energy conservation and asthma home triggers, and building some better behaviors around indoor air quality as well.
Okay, so would it be fair, so some of the things that you're experiencing are ambivalence around taking a job or not taking a job, engaging in skill building or other activities that your organization may offer, or any kind of behavioral change that aims to improve their health in one direction or another. Others to add to this list?
In early learning, where we have a required number of home visits or classroom hours for the enrolled children and families,
Okay.
oftentimes we run into families with so much going on that committing, actually following through on letting the home visitor in, the number of times that they've contractually agreed will happen, or maintaining a minimum level of attendance at a preschool classroom.
So attendance, I'm going to say here, attendance and full participation in services, okay?
Especially when it's a home visit model where staff have confirmed the appointment, traveled however many miles out into the county to the appointment,
Right.
get to the door, and
Right.
it's not accessible.
So it's fair to say that one day they make the agreement that they're going to do this, the next day when the staff goes to show up, that agreement is no longer there, and then a considerable amount of time has been used to try to provide these kinds of services. And then so it's kind of like the uptake of care is not taking place. Okay, wonderful. You had your hand?
Just difficulty in helping clients determining a direction.
Oh, yeah.
Or the way they want to go, or even identifying what they want to do.
And I'm going to call that, I'm going to say this in a second, So one of the things that we call that in MI is a focus. So is people have so many things going on in their life that what out of all those fires burning, which one do you want to put out first? Which one should we focus on?
Just freeze.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that a little bit more too. So anything else about the challenges of engaging clients or serving clients?
Just taking steps toward agreed upon goals that
Okay.
we may think that they set themselves through, case management work or something, conversations, but that sort of progress is, and sometimes it's, think about, we're asking people to budget in some classes or even save a little money, and the resources are so limited that
Yeah.
it's hard to help people see that that's even possible.
So it's hard to get the direction that they want to go, maintain going in that direction, checking with them on a regular basis that we're moving in that direction, and almost even, is that still the right direction for them to be going? Is that fair to say? Yeah, so it's kind of like this ongoing conversation about helping people move in a way that is improving their health or living conditions. Okay. Well, I think all of you brought up some pretty key items that are definitely related to motivational interviewing, and that this technique has the possibility of helping in these ways. So if good with you, I'll continue to share a little bit about what is MI and what we're planning to do with the trainings that we have here. And again, raise your hands and let's have a chat as we go along. So next up, I want to just say that motivational interviewing has been around for 30 years. This is the third edition of MI that we have up over here, and it's changed over time, of course. And what I'm going to be sharing with you today are some of the updated concepts that are in motivational interviewing that I think have crystallized and better affirmed the work and how to do the work. But like I said, it has been around for a long time. It's one of the most studied evidence-based practices out there. And Miller and Rolnick, who are the authors of MI, often do not affirm that MI works everywhere. They tend to go back and research it and look at it and then make a determination, does MI work with smoking? Does MI work with medication adherence? Does MI work with this other practice? So they are very clear that they don't endorse it for everything. They like to test it and see, does it work in those arenas? And there's been over, and this was a few years ago, 200 clinical trials with motivational interviewing proving in ways that it works or not. One of the key factors about if MI works or doesn't work is the quality of the practitioner and their use of the skills. So it's almost like the sharper your tool, the better the outcomes. The duller the tool, it just doesn't work that well. So it says a lot about how well people are trained and prepared to do that yields better outcomes than anything else. So it's just one thing that came out of their studies. Here's a brief definition of what is MI. In the latest book, he has 3 different definitions to for people to pick and choose something that kind of works for them in particular. But this one I like to put up there because it's about solving the common problem of ambivalence. And it's this idea that ambivalence is not pathological, is that we all have it, and that everybody is faced with a degree of ambivalence that we're trying to resolve and move towards something that may be healthy for us. Some of us have half a pound of ambivalence, and some of us carry a couple of tons of ambivalence. And all of our clients are very, very different depending on the issue that they're trying to address. So it can be a light lift, it can be quite of a heavy lift, just depending. Next, I'd like to talk with you about the 4 processes. This is one of the items that's new in MI3, and I've found it to be a wonderful way to encapsulate the conversation that you have with people around motivational interviewing. And it provides this direction and steps along the way. So when you're doing MI, you can kind of gauge yourself. Did I get this step right? Okay, good. Let's go to the next one. Did I get this step right? Good. I can go to the next one. And if I got this one right, good. It leads to the fourth one. And I think it's become kind of a really nice way to guide the conversation. And you, as a practitioner, you can kind of assess yourself, gee, I'm having this kind of complication with my client at this point. Where am I in the 4 processes? Do I need to back up and go step back a little bit and pick up over here before I move forward? So I'll tell you about that. And then within the 4 processes, all the work happens. And I'm also going to share some of those pieces of what that work is. So essentially, one of the number 1 steps that has to exist is engagement. So if I have engagement and you and I say, yes, we are going forward with doing something, then I've accomplished that step of we can do something together. Miller likes to say that engagement can take 5 minutes or 5 months. And if we've seen the work of some of the videos here in Bellingham of the homeless work that they've done, one of the quotes I've heard in one of those videos is, it takes 70 touches for somebody to say yes to housing. So if you think about that, engagement with some of our difficult clients, it may take multiple encounters to get a high quality engagement so they'll say, yes, I'm willing to focus on that item, but I gotta get that engagement at any given time. The 20% rule is that we gotta be focusing on engagement 20% of the time, all the time, because engagement, it slips out of gear from time to time. You're working with somebody and all of a sudden you're not engaged with them anymore. So you got to keep giving that attention throughout the conversation that you're having with people. So it's not assumed that engagement stays in the conversation that you were having with clients. Make sense? Okay. Second, if I get really good engagement, then I can say, so what shall we focus on? And the client might have 10 things, 5 things, 2, 3 things to focus on, but my goal is to find a focus. And here's what's critical with MI. I need to have a focus if I'm going to go to the next stage, which is eliciting. If the focus is, shall I get a job or not, then I'm going to explore the pros and cons of getting that job, the upside, the downsides of getting that job. If I have a really clear focus, I can do the next step. If I don't have a really clear focus, I could be asking the client about, what do you think about a job? And they're thinking about housing. So if we're not on the same page about what we're exploring, we're not heading in the same direction. So it becomes critical to keep that focus with the client. And during the trainings, we teach a variety of skills about how to do this so that people can figure out, do I got that focus? So the one thing to the conversation is, where shall we go? It's the conversation of where shall we go? The next one is, well, whether we should do it or not. Shall we do the job? Shall we not do the job? Shall we go into housing? Shall we not go into housing? The voking, you could almost say, is the heart of MI. This is where you're having these careful and very considerate conversations to listen to the client's interest in doing something or not doing something. And MI is particularly attending to the language that the client is using about whether they're going to do that or not. In MI, that's called change talk. The opposite of change talk is called sustain talk. So practitioners learn to listen for change talk in the midst of all the reasons why not to do it. And the goal in this evoking phase is to pick up on that little quiet voice of change talk and start to nurture it and get a little bit more of it. And you almost think of it this way as clients come in over here saying no and they're ambivalent, and you got a teeny bit of change talk, and what you're trying to do is get a little bit more change talk till the scales kind of tip like this, and finally they tip in the direction of change. But it's this gentle conversation that you're having with people that you're getting them over to this phase. If you try to tip the scale too fast, they'll tip it back in this direction. You try to pull them into a plan, and they'll go, no, you don't pull me into a plan. That is the skill of MI. And during our trainings, we will work with practitioners to augment their abilities to do just that. Questions, comments? Okay. In MI, they say, out of these 4 processes, that it's still MI if you don't get to planning. And in many ways, you might think of planning as the bonus. Because if I'm a person carrying 1 ton of ambivalence, a 30-minute appointment may not get me to planning. But a couple of months of appointments might get me to that plan. So I might be able to make a small plan that is part of the larger picture that will get me to the bigger plan in 3 to 6 months, whatever time frame that is. But sometimes these big changes don't always come from a single conversation of motivational interviewing. So if you can do engaging, focusing, and evoking, and you can get a client to walk out of your office going, wow, maybe I should think about housing. Maybe I should think about following through with the parenting appointments. Maybe I should prioritize taking medications. You would consider that a very successful appointment. Whether they do it or not is still on the edge because you may not have reached there, but at least you've gone a little bit beyond the ambivalence and you got people contemplating the change. Are you still with me with that? Okay. So those are the 4 processes of MI. During the introduction and advanced training, we walk people through the first 2 phases in the introduction training and the second 2 phases in the advanced training. And I must admit, not a lot of attention is focused on the planning because it turns out that most folks are pretty darn good with planning. When you get to planning, you know your job. It's getting through that ambivalence is the difficult thing for a lot of our practitioners to learn. So I focus more on helping them to get really good at doing the change talk and dealing with sustained talk. And planning will come with time. Next, I'd like to share with you one of the kind of the core features of motivational interviewing, and this is considered the spirit of MI. And it's kind of like, you'd almost kind of like call it the value statement of MI. This is the heart of MI, that if I'm doing my sessions with people, here's my commitment to MI, is that I'm going to be building partnerships with the person I'm working with. I'm going to evoke from them what they want to do, so I'm always seeking their interest in what they want to do. I want to continually convey that you have the right and the privilege to do this or not do this, that you have the autonomy to live your life that way or that way. And ultimately, the 4th one, compassion, was added in the MI3 book. And that came out of some of the work they did, as they found that you could use the other 3 items almost in a manipulative way if you wanted to. But compassion says, if you add that to the equation, is that you'll never do anything that's not in the best interest of the client. I will do no harm. And one of the examples that Miller and Rolnick talk about, that I could use partnership, autonomy, and evocation and probably sell you a car. And I could probably sell you a car that you can't afford, but with compassion, I can't sell you a car you can't afford. I mean, because I'm not going to do anything that's not in your best interest. So they added that in there to kind of balance the dance of MI. Things that we're doing on a regular basis in MI are called the principles. So practitioners learn these components, and they're doing them at any given time when they're having a conversation with a client. These are not overt activities. These are just behind the scenes. So I'm constantly expressing empathy with my clients. I'm constantly looking at how to develop discrepancies. So you really like to get housing, but you're not too keen on filling out an application. Makes it pretty hard for you to get housing. You really like to be a better parent, but you don't follow through with your parenting classes. Wonder how that's going for you. And you continue to develop these discrepancies in a way to build the angst that the client's feeling. And the more angst that builds, maybe that helps to tilt in a direction of change. But the angst lies with the client, not with the practitioner. It's your angst that you're having to live with and your choices that you're making that continually keeps you in the situation that you're in. My job is to help you kind of resolve that if I can, to see if you can make a decision that's better. But if you don't want to make the decision, that's okay too, because you're allowed to live in that kind of angst if you want to live there. The other one is this idea of supporting self-efficacy, which is about skills, abilities, and strengths. A lot of our clients may want to do something, but they don't feel like they have the knowledge, the know-how, the brights to make that happen. So one of the things that I'm constantly doing in an MI conversation is I'm looking for your skills and abilities that you can bring to bear so that when we come to this part about deciding to move in this direction or not, I might be able to say, sounds like in our previous conversation that you were able to fill out that application, you were able to make that appointment on time, and you were able to get housing at another time. So in many ways, you got quite a bit of skills to bear here. I'm wondering if any of those skills can be used in the current challenge that we're facing today. So bringing those skills to bear as part of the conversation, clients feel a little bit buoyed and more confident. They're more likely to step in and go, well, I think I'm ready to kind of take that chance and maybe fill out that application for the 10th time. I'm confident this time that this might be the right time to do that. But clients need to have that sense that they can do it. And the more that my clients feel like they can do it, the more likely they're going to do it. One of the things that we do to support self-efficacy is we use affirmations. And practitioners are taught how to use specific affirmations that pull on self-efficacies in the conversation. It's not about praise. It's about identifying skills and bringing those forward. And the last is this thing they call dance with discord. It used to be called rolling with resistance. They took out the word resistance because it was accusatory. It was labeling of the client. The client's not resistant. They're just very committed to not doing anything. That's not resistant. They call that committed to the status quo. And it's resistant when I want you to do something different. That's where the resistance comes, because somebody is challenging them to do something different in their lives. So it's commitment to the status quo. So one thing that happens is that when I try to move a client off the status quo, then we get tension between us. The other thing that we found here is that there's this idea of discord, which is when a practitioner and a client are not on the same page anymore. And most practitioners are keenly aware when they're not on the same page with their client. It's almost like a gut check, like, I'm really off base with this person. And often we don't listen to that quiet voice that tells us we're off base, and we keep having the conversation even though we're off base. And MI says, gee, If you get that gut check that you're off base with them, stop. Apologize. Get back on base with people. For example, you know, we were talking about housing, and it seemed to be the focus of our conversation. All of a sudden, it seems like you're way more interested in talking about this relationship you're having. Let's go back to that and talk about that, because if that's more important to you, it's more important for me that we're spending time working on what's important to you. And that's what I'm here for, is to find ways for you to resolve things that are valuable to you. So I back up and I go follow the client and I go help them achieve what they want to achieve. A lot of times people will say, well, gosh, I'm going here, I'm going there, are we ever making any progress? And I think a lot of us know that if you can build some small achievements with the client with what they want to do, they'll start to do some things that maybe they don't want to do later on. You know, let's do some of the things with them that helps to foster a relationship. Then maybe we can do some of the harder things that are in their lives to achieve those long-term goals. Okay? These are called the principles of MI. We spend a considerable amount of time doing that. Next, we talk about the ORs, which are open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. These are known as the micro skills. They're used in every phase of MI. So if you think about engaging, I use the ORs during engaging. I use the ORs during focusing. I use the ORs during eliciting, and I use them during planning. The difference is that when I use the ORs during engaging, I'm going to ask big open-ended questions to try to engage people. But when I'm focusing, I'm going to ask a more narrow question. And then when I'm evoking and eliciting, I'm going to ask even more narrow questions. And then when I'm planning, I'm going to ask questions related to planning. So I continue to use all these skills, but they're just in service a little bit differently. So practitioners that come to the training, they'll learn all these different sizes and fits. And usually by the fourth day, they're starting to get, okay, that's when I use that one, that's when I use this one, that's when I use that one. They become much more skilled at this by the fourth day of the training. One thing that they say in MI that if you learn the micro skills, the rest of MI will start to arrive. So use these skills in your practice and the principles start to come and the spirit of MI starts to come and the processes start to fit together. But central to learning MI is getting these skills down pretty good. And you start doing those, the rest of the pieces start to fit together. As part of the studies in MI, originally in the first version, MI was about behavior change. They since did a lot of studies and they know now that MI is very good for helping people make a decision to do or not to do might be an example. MI is very good for helping people to look at their attitudes. It's something that you can change in yourself. So attitudes are one of the things that I might make a decision about. I don't want to have that kind of attitude today, and I can change that in myself. So it works there. Condition, which is to address a medical or a behavioral health condition or not to address it. Many of us may have a condition or two that we're very ambivalent about addressing, and we leave that condition buried for months and years because we're not interested. And so this is a way to kind of bring that condition forward to consider to start addressing it or not. And you can see how heavy that can be. Imagine a person that's got lifelong behavioral conditions that have not been serving them well. They're going to be very ambivalent about addressing those because of the complication. And finally, it works in resolution. And what I mean by resolution is you may be holding on to a grievance or grief, and you decide to address that. You may have a relationship that has been stagnant, and you say, okay, I'm going to address that relationship. But again, it gets kind of like this decision to do something. So in the MI3, with some of the broader studies, they're saying, you know, MI works there and it works here. And they're continually doing work to see in what other ways can MI function. So I looked at your work, and it's pretty clear that you have a considerable amount of areas that a client can be working in your organization. And MI may end up being a piece of the bigger picture for you folks, but you often are going to do things around skill building. You might be using cognitive behavioral therapy with your people. You might be doing educational sessions with people. And if I had more bubbles up here, there would be other parenting classes, other items that are essential for your clients to kind of achieve some of the health benefits that you're leaning towards. MI could be a very good tool to help people to resolve and make a decision to engage in an education class, to engage in skill building, to increase their participation in parenting classes. So it may not be the end all to do all these things, but it could be a step to help people make better decisions to stick with some of the programs that you have offered. Questions, comments? Okay. All right. Yes, please.
Just on Monday, we had an all-department meeting, sort of a review around some of the culture of poverty. And the thing that I think works so well with MI for us is that, you know, re-emphasizing the fact that so often people in a culture of poverty have a very circular or diffuse decision-making process, as opposed to the middle or upper class, very linear, beginning, middle, end. And I think this lets us stay in tune with that without feeling disappointed or rejected by the client.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that taking an MI approach with people that like live in a culture of poverty, that you can stay close to their pattern of how they process their life. And as a practitioner, I can be there with the client in the pattern that they have and not feel like I have to be something different, and it fits better for that clientele, and increases the probability that I might engage them because I'm showing that I understand that, which kind of leads me to this next slide, which is, you know, our role in MI, the practitioner's role, is as a guide. And so I would want to understand where my client is, engage them in the process they are, and then work with them to resolve things in a way that work for them. And if it's a very circular kind of way, then I want to find out what's your circle and how does that work for you. If you're linear and more middle class and you go that way, then let me work with you that way. And we teach this also in the training, is to get people to understand, be the client's guide. Don't be their boss. As a guide, they're going to help tell us what they want to do, and then I can support them and help them accomplish that. So I put them a little bit in front of me as we walk down that road together. That's a great example. Okay? So I wanted to tell you this thing about change talk. It's in that evoking phase, and this is the part that our wonderfully well-trained practitioners have to work the hardest, because most of us aren't trained to hear change talk. It'll present itself, and we'll just step right on it and just blow over it like a train going through town. And the more the practitioners, learn to recognize change talk, then they can slow down that conversation during evoking and start to hear that thing where they can start to tip those scales in favor of change. And so there's a big deal with this, and we spend a lot of time in the advanced training trying to get people to do this part. It's complicated, but the training yields this kind of outcome. So the Change talk language is desire, I want to do that, I'd like to do that, ability, I've done that in the past, reason and need. And what we're trying to do is get people over to commitment language. Let me say a little bit more. So desire language is something like this. I want to find a job. Ability, I quit before, I can do it again. Reason, my PO would get off my back. A lot of times reason sounds like the things that I want to get away from. And then need is almost an amplified reason. I have to take my meds. It's like I'm at a dead end. And so this is often known as preparatory language. This does not yield behavior change. It's prepping them to do that. What I'm trying to get to next is commitment language. And the commitment language is I will, I do. It comes in the form of taking steps, of coming back and said, you know what? I filled out that application last week. I'm not sure I'm going to get housing, but I went there and I filled out the application. That's taking steps. So that's the kind of place we want to get with people. And the classic example is, they're getting married, and you want to hear certain commitments from each other. You don't want to hear, I would like to get married to you. I have some good reasons to get married to you. I have the ability to get married to you. This is my third marriage. And by God, you have insurance and I don't, so I got a high need to marry you. That's not what you want to hear. You want to hear, I do. And that's commitment language. So you're moving people off this preparatory language and you're moving them over to commitment language. But the commitment language comes from the client, not us. And the trick in MI is to get them to voice the commitment language and not I. Okay, let me tell you about the trainings. So we got introductory 2-day, advanced 2-day. Sometimes we can build in booster sessions. Booster sessions can look like a 2-hour booster session, a 4-hour booster session. A lot of those are custom made. I did a series of booster sessions for King County Drug Court people. They ended up changing their whole drug court paradigm after they got trained with MI. They took a very punitive approach with their clients and they realized, oh my God, we weren't getting the outcomes. They flipped their court and they're doing MI basically in King County Drug Court now. And I haven't been there in a while, but they've told me that they've just made an amazing turnaround. Downtown Emergency Services, I did 6 months of booster training with those folks, and they were dealing with a lot of the clients that you deal with. And it just took a while because you get the training, but then you need the practice. So the booster sessions, and then some ongoing coaching. So that's some of the possibilities.
Now, David, we've talked about cohort sessions. Is that similar to what you're talking about up there?
Yeah, so
Last time you were here, we talked about kind of building some cohorts that would come out of our training.
Exactly. So a cohort session would be something like we send 30 people through intro, 30 people through advanced, and then we look at who are the folks that want to carry on with the practice, and then we do some booster sessions with them. We can work that out. What's that look like as 2 hours a month for 6 months? We can plan that to how that best fits with your organization. And then we're also looking at some champions in here, and I'm going to say a little bit more about that again, because there's this thing about sustainability. You don't want to always pay me to keep coming back to your organization for years to come to do this. So if we can find some internal champions, we might be able to do some coaching of them to help to keep some of the skills internally so you can help build up your capacity within your own organization. Does that fit?
Thanks.
Yeah. So maybe we would do a couple of cohorts coming through here. And then it takes a while to learn this. Years ago, the state of Washington said, we love motivational interviewing. Would you just go train all of our substance use disorder practitioners in the state? And we just said, that would be a wonderful contract. Give us 5 years. Because it's slow uptake. learning MI. It's not like you just acquire a skill. It's sometimes a slight paradigm shift in how people do their work. And it's a slow learn, but when you get it, it sticks. That's the beauty, is that when you get it, it really, really sticks. So love to be able to train the whole state, but you can only put people through a number of people through that funnel. And we call it a skills-based training. So I'm teaching skills, not knowledge. It's like, I practice that skill. Let me see how you did it. Okay, here's how you fix that and do it a little better. Practice that. That's how it comes out. Well, you could fine tune it like this. Let's do it a little bit different. So you're practicing that skill over and over, and it's the practice that kind of builds the capacity and efficacy. Yes?
David, in your experience, are there pros and cons to having the groupings, the cohorts, whatever we're going to call them, being similar level, pure kind of employees versus a mixture of hierarchy within the groups?
Yeah, great question. Whether it's we should stick to kind of like a focus in the organization or across the organization. I think going across the organization, I think it's fine. What happens is it's like a tipping point, and like say if you have your team there, 10% of the team learns it, then 20% learn it, then 30% learn it. Eventually there's this tipping point, like over 50% learning it. That there's this capacity place where you kind of get like, wow, everybody's doing this, and I think that then helps to carry the weight of the work. If there's like 1 or 2 practitioners in a team of 10, they're going to be a little timid about practicing it. Whereas if there's 9 out of 10 that are there using it, everybody wants to practice and use it.
I get that. I guess I'm asking is, obviously there's going to be some personal growth and revelation of our own motivations and decision making as human beings as we go through the training. Is it safer for people to be the people who don't have evaluative control over their future in the same group?
I think mixing them is fine. You're in an organization as big as yours, you want to start bringing up the capacity in all realms. And organizations that decide to do MI, you want to basically bring up the whole organization's understanding of MI. And the more that the whole organization knows and supports that, the more it's going to move forward. Pockets of it, I think, I was telling Tim that it's almost not worth it sometimes for an organization just to invest in a couple of trainings, because the skills won't stick. I'm not sure I'm still answering your question.
I don't feel you on.
Yes, I'm not sure I can.
From our experience, we've had staff take advantage of David's trainings through Northwest Youth Services, and we had direct reports in those trainings, and I haven't heard any awkwardness or any issues that came along with that.
I agree with you with the saturation and the tipping point within the department. It was just, was the process comfortable enough for people to be practicing and
Oh.
I think
Our experience was yes, it was very helpful.
They did really good. I mean, I think the first morning on the intro to MI, people were, they might have perspired a little bit more than the rest of the times. But as soon as they got over that, hey, this is about practicing together, they started getting it. And I mix them up. I'll work with your partner, then we'll number off, and we'll change it up. And we do enough of it right from the beginning that it's kind of like everybody gets the sense that, oh yeah, I won't be sitting here knitting. This will be, I have to participate. And so that sets the tone right from the beginning. And I've had supervisors sit in on the trainings, and it does just fine. Everybody's so busy just trying to get their own thing right, they don't have a whole lot of time to think about if anybody's paying attention to me.
Another related question, you talk about identifying some champions.
Yes.
I'm assuming, do some of those just sort of present themselves?
Yes.
Some people just pick it up quicker, they're just more adept at doing it.
Yeah, so how are champions identified is the question, and I'll tell you that's exactly what happens. You'll have a couple, 3 people that just, it's like they got plugged into 220, and they're just like, oh my God, that's the practice, that's the thing I've been looking, oh, this resonates with me, and you kind of like go, oh, nice. You know, you almost kind of want to go, tell me more, because really they're your champions, and that's how I've identified other people that I've coached and trained in MI, is that they sat in the front of the room, they stayed after the training, they asked additional questions, they wanted to know more. It's like, this is your thing, you like this, and there's, 10% or less are those folks.
So maybe we can check in with you after the sessions to kind of see
Yeah.
who you think are those champions, and maybe in the different groups we could try to see what we can do to develop those folks.
Yeah, including some of our staff who just attended some of your
Yeah.
trainings.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew who was OC or not,
I-
but put them in the mix, yeah.
And it'll start to surface. They'll be the ones bringing it up at staff meetings. They'll be the ones asking for more time. They'll be the ones wondering about the follow-up. They're the ones that say, hey, where's the rest of this? And let's do that. I think that'd be a wonderful thing to keep an eye out for those folks. So here's some of the work I do while I'm with the students, for lack of a better word, but these are all the things. In particular, what we do is this thing called real plays, and that's the risk-taking that people have to do. Is we ask people to play out a real scenario in your life, but something that you would be comfortable talking about with your peers, because we want people to have an experience of real ambivalence, not just made-up ambivalence. And if people do that, the effect of the practice sessions are much, much more valuable. And so I set that up very carefully, and I put the parameters around it, and I invite people to participate, and autonomy. If you don't, we can do kind of a role play. But these are some of the things that we're doing in there. Dyads, triads, small group discussions. And this is not terribly overt, but train in an MI style. So every kind of interaction in the MI training, I'm doing reflections, affirmations, open-ended questions, and I'm doing evoking, and so I'm actually training in an MI style. And that's kind of recommended so that you can show people that. I think by the 4th day they get a little sick of it, but hey, it's saturation is where we're at, and so I go for the saturation. Okay. So here is the introduction to MI agenda. I've got a couple of handouts for you folks, and I just wanted you to see what an intro to MI looks like. And like I said, we start off in the morning, we do a practice, we learn about, there's quite a bit of didactic information about the principles, the ORs, MI spirit, and then right away we start talking about engaging and using the ORs and engaging, and then we get all the way up through focusing. So that's what we do with the introduction training. And they get, 6 or more practice sessions. So I mean, we're practicing all day for the 2 days that we're in session. So it's constantly, it's not a lot of me up here, it's the participants are working hard. So that's an intro agenda. And the advanced agenda, not my favorite, but absolutely essential, is that you have to go back and cover intro and make sure you got everybody on the same page, and then we reevaluate ourselves and kind of say, so where are we today with engaging and focusing? Do you got that? Okay, if you got that, okay, now let's move on to evoking. And so then we spend basically 2 days working on the evoking piece of that. I mean, that's kind of the overview. There's a lot more detail than that. But again, it's kind of very much in the MI style. I want to make sure I'm engaged with you. We're not going to go forward until we know that we're on the same page and we're getting ready to do this next thing. Okay? And then some additional skills. One in particular I think would be fantastic is this case consultation. This would be something we would want to use in a booster session, but it's how to do clinical supervision in MI style. So you go in and do your clinical supervision groups, but you bring in an MI approach to how do you deal with your clients. And it's a very teachable skill for a clinician to do that. And it takes about 20 minutes to do a case. And so David, if you were the practitioner, you were stuck with the client, you would bring that to the clinical supervision, and we would work through that case scenario in an MI style, and we would use the rest of the group to have them bring forward their good MI skills and add to the pot, and then you would be the person that would watch what a group would think about if they were in your shoes, and then you use that knowledge to then go back and approach your client from an MI style. It's a wonderful tool, works really well. This other thing, brief intervention, it's also a very usable tool. I find if I try to teach that just out of context, when people don't learn MI, it gets kind of technique-y. They just kind of want to use it like a hammer or a screwdriver, and it's out of context. But I think if we put that in a booster session, it can be a wonderful 5 to 7 minute small skill set that you can use when you have to deliver information and try to motivate people on a small topic. And then ultimately, it's the decision of Opportunity Council, how close do we want to get people to preparing them for video encoding? And the goal would be somewhere down the line. So this is kind of how it looks. We provide this education. You folks do a lot of the opportunities for people to practice and coaching. So I can help be part of this, the coaching scenario as we move along, but your staff will need opportunities to practice to be able to, make that happen. So finally, what can leaders do? Couple different things. Provide an atmosphere for skill acquisition. So there has to be a time. I've heard so many stories about things getting added to people's workloads, but nothing taken away and making some room for something else. And we all know that scenario. We get another task, we get another job, and it just gets added on. And there's a challenge with that because something has to give to be a little bit of room to learn these things. Time for some booster sessions. I put this in there as more of a challenge, but it's something to think about as you kind of move forward. Is this where you want to go or not? It's not a have to, but it's something to think about. There's quite a bit written about organizations that decide to be kind of an MI organization, and it ends up filtering to everybody. So the front staff addresses somebody, the new client, in an MI style. The next practitioner that does the intake does it in an MI style. The clinical supervisor does clinical supervision in an MI style. Managers and directors start meetings and talk about meetings and ask open-ended questions, engage people in an MI style. So it means that it kind of becomes part of the culture, and people need to make some decisions how much of that fits for you. So that might be one of those things that's pending. Reasonable time frames to reach proficiency. If you had somebody going at this full time, I could see people getting to some early proficiency in about 6 months. Depends on how much practice, but you could start to see early proficiency at 6 months. And on a scale of 1 to, a lot of the scales are 1 to 7. Proficiency is when people get to about 5. You're not looking for 7s. You're looking for, just over the 4. Get people over the 4. You're not looking for perfect. It's just better than 50%. And you can get people better than 50% at least 6 months. MI adopters, we talked about that, Tim. Who are those early adopters, so we can keep an eye out for them. Teach Opportunity Council some MI supervision skills, so we can do more of that as a consideration.
What does that mean?
Well, one is using the case consultation. So one is, that model of case consultation, starting to embed that in your organization, so that the clinical supervisors of a team would come in and use a MI case consultation and give their team members an opportunity to look at the client from an MI perspective. And then the clinician, the supervisor, starts to become more skilled as an MI leader within your organization because they're leading the clinical supervision session. You got to lead it. And to lead it, you got to know it. And to know it, you got to have participated in some of the training. So it challenges them to be more than just a participant. They're become a leader to some degree in the work. And we can do more to kind of boost their skills.
Does that extend to sort of beyond the client supervision, but actually kind of embedding motivational interviewing with how we also supervise our staff?
Great question. So the question is can you take this step where we use MI in clinical supervision? And the answer is absolutely yes. And it's another level of integration, so to speak, and another level of training to do that. But many organizations have decided to go that way because, gee, if we're working with our clients that way and our practitioners are trained that way and we're getting really good motivation from people, why not practice it with our people? Now, you use the MI to motivate people to do a behavior change in their personal employee plan, but at some point you don't need to do evoking all the time. If the employee says, yes, I'm going to do that, then you still keep the spirit of MI, but you don't have to grind through the evoking phase. If they say, I need you to acquire these 4 skills in this year, and the practitioner says, I want to do that, then you don't really have to go to stage 3 and do evoking. They say, wonderful, sounds like that's a plan that's going to work for both of us. What can I do to support you in accomplishing your plan right here? So it's used, but used kind of sparingly in how you do that. We could talk more about that. So that's it. There's my 9 o'clock, 1 hour, MI. Questions and comments? I'm hoping there's some good editing.
Is it, so the way we're in our department set up right now, we have some roles that you could sort of define as that clinical supervision. Their main role is to really be focused on working, supervising the caseload. They are the case managers. Most of their check-ins are doing sort of that proper supervision.
Right.
And there's people like me, where I'm a manager in the department. I manage coordinators who then manage some direct service staff. But my coordinators are also doing some direct service. So I have less comfort in the sort of clinical supervision. I'm much more stronger in the administrative managing contracts and stuff. And so is it appropriate as we develop, is it important for like somebody in my position or like my position to develop the skills as if I'm a clinical supervisor, or could that role be played by another person in the department, or are there, do you understand what I'm
I think I understand your question. Is that, do I need to be proficient as a supervisor in MI to be able to do that, or should I rely on some other staff to do that and let me stay in the role as sort of an admin manager and do my admin job the best that I know how to do it? And I would say, it's hard to get everybody, to get all your managers to be skilled MI practitioners. It's just, you're not going to be able to do that. It's too much work. And because you don't have a lot of client contact, you're not going to get the practice time, so you're not going to be able to do it. However, there are probably some basic set of things that as a management team that you want to be able to provide to your staff for them to become proficient. So you may be not the one that are supervising it, but you make sure that you have a supervisor well trained in it, and there's time for your staff to have a coaching session periodically. So I would say, it's too much to try to train everybody to be super. I mean, not only do you have to be the base level, you need to have this leadership level of it, and it's too much for everybody to know. And we could talk about at some point, like, what are some key elements that management may need to know to support this. So we can give this 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, and then kind of come back together and say, no, so where are we with this? How's it filtering into our organization? Where are the barriers? What's working? What more do we need to, if we were trying to create more sustainability, what would that look like? And I think that's going to depend on your organization and your time, and you guys are doing a lot of work. It's hard to fit one more thing.
Requires a level of commitment, from what I hear, that
Yeah.
you've got to make sure you're willing to do. And
Yeah.
shouldn't assume that. We need to make a conscious decision one way or another.
Yeah, that's it. It's what you're doing today here, taking this under consideration as an organization, is several steps above many other organizations. They send their staff to this and have their staff come back and hope that something sticks that improves outcomes. And as a trainer, I'll take your money and I'll train your staff, but I'm always like how much is that going to stick? Because if the organization doesn't do much to support it, I know it's not going to be there in 90 days. You even thinking about it today, that you may want to go this direction, you've kind of taken the first step of saying, well, we've opened the door, let's see what's next. That's huge compared to many organizations. The King County Drug Court was able to make those changes because management said, we just got to do something different. Downtown Emergency Services did it. Seattle Counseling did it. They just said, it's more than just the people. We gotta support this practice. King County, I think they have more than 50% of their behavioral health workforce is trained in MI. King County as an organization decided that they wanted all their behavioral workforce to be trained in MI. And I probably trained 500 practitioners down there. And I'm not bragging, I'm just saying their commitment to the whole county was so big that they spent thousands of dollars trying to get their whole behavioral health workforce up to a level. And they didn't care where you worked, because we know you're switching jobs. We just want the whole workforce to be up at a higher level. That was a commitment.